Welcome. Today is Wednesday, June the 14th, and we are live with Christian News TY. We welcome you here, and we certainly welcome our newly elected Sheriff, Stephen Gardner. Thank you, Sheriff, for coming and being with us today and taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you're a busy man.
Hey, a lot going on, but thank you for coming in and taking time and allowing me to talk about the Sheriff's Office.
Well, thank you very much, and we're excited about this interview. We've got a lot of good questions, and we're hoping that we're really going to be able to inform the citizens of Williamsburg County about what's going on here.
Okay.
Firstly, let me ask, you've been in office for 6 months now.
Right. Almost.
Almost 6 months.
Almost, yeah.
So what are some of the challenges that you have faced in this short amount of time?
Hey, let's see. Where do we start? Nah, it's been a great experience. There's been a lot of things to do that have really kept me busy. Starting January 3rd, of course, you know, you come into a period of time where the budget season's upon us. So, of course, there's a lot of budget stuff to be done. So a lot of analyzing and figuring out what we need, what we don't need, what's good, what's bad. Dealing with the fact that we need vehicles. We have 41 plus vehicles that need to be replaced because of the condition of our fleet at this time. So that's been a challenge in and of itself because that's an astronomical amount of vehicles to try to replace at one time.
Right.
So we've tried to do several things to supplement, maybe not necessarily having to replace 41 at one time, but it takes some sitting down and analyzing, strategizing, trying to figure out how we can make what we do have work so that we can be efficient. Manpower, of course, that's always an issue. I think that's an issue for everybody in the law enforcement arena because trying to get people hired, of course, this day and time you have to vet people because you need to make sure you get a good qualified employee working for the department, for the Sheriff's Office, I should say.
Right.
And that can be a little time consuming because doing your background investigations and going through the interviews and so forth. But things of that nature have been the biggest challenge. Taking on the workload is something that I want to do, so I embrace that with open arms. It can get to be a full-time job.
Oh, I'm sure.
Long hours, but at the end of the day, I embrace it because I know at the end of the day there will be better days down the road.
Right, right. One of my questions that I'm really interested in knowing, I know that we have one of the largest counties in the state, if not the largest. And I didn't realize just how large until I started digging around a little bit and come to find out it's 936 square miles in this county.
Right.
And how many officers at a time do you have on duty, like day shift or night shift, or can you share that? Or and the part B to that question is how do you cover such a large area and make sure that everybody is satisfied with your service?
Right. But I tell you what, that is in a challenge in and of itself. We have 3 officers that are assigned to the patrol division shifts. Now on day shift, of course, we have our narcotics division out. We have our investigators out as well, providing support along with civil. But the biggest problem for us in covering the 936 square miles is a lot of times doing the night shift, there are only 3 officers. So we try to make up by sometimes splitting the shifts and having additional people work over different hours so that we do have sufficient people out to address the calls for service. But it can be a challenge sometimes because out of that 936 square miles, 934 is land, and we cover a lot of it. So a lot of times we find our deputies going to calls, like say for instance, I use this analogy a lot. We go to Hemingway to Muddy Creek, and you may have a domestic call, just using that for an example, in the Cays area. So of course that requires more than one officer just for safety purposes. So a lot of times we get our officers spread out, and then we have pending calls. So it makes it hard for someone to respond to our calls for service. The time is very great because if those things occur in the manner I just described, then it prolongs the time period for someone to be able to respond. So that's why a lot of times we all kind of listen out to the radio. It can be a little cumbersome and a little bit, inconveniencing to your schedule, but we try to listen because we want to make sure that, safety is priority 1.
Right.
But in our budget, we try to add additional officers so that we can at least get 4 officers to a shift.
Right.
And that way it'll provide better coverage of the 934 square miles of land that we got to cover. Hopefully one day we would like to get to where we have at least 5. Because we need it.
Sure.
You can't sufficiently work specific areas and be visible in them a lot of times.
Right.
A lot of times your citizens, they have complaints, and they're valid complaints, and we embrace those complaints. But sometimes getting them to understand the amount of manpower that we have out, and the fact that, we have to be, good stewards of our time that we spend. We can't work but so much overtime. We do utilize overtime, but at the end of the day, people do need rest and downtime. And
right.
So it makes it hard sometimes to cover all areas and be visible. We try to do the best that we can to be proactive and get out and be visible in the areas we can. But hopefully, we'll be able to add additional officers so that we can have a greater presence and be seen. And, that in itself, visibility in itself is a deterrent. And so hopefully one day, we'll be able to increase those numbers. Hopefully we can get to this 4, but, we don't know how the budget season will end. We'll find that out coming into July. And so we'll see what direction we can go from there with as far as trying to address our manpower needs to at least get us to where we have 4 people on the shift instead of the 3 that we currently have in the patrol division.
Right. What is your vision for the next 4 years? Where do you want to, other than, and I think you expressed one of your concerns is increasing manpower. What is your vision for the Sheriff's Department and your plan to hopefully get up to the max of 5 that you need, and in general?
Well, one of the things, I try to keep things simple. I can give a complex vision, or you can just keep it relatively simple. But I think at the end of the day, our goal and vision is to protect and serve the citizens of Williamsburg County, and to be as efficiently and courteously as we can in providing that service. So at the end of the day, what I want to do is become good stewards and manage our product. And our product, when I say that, I preach that a lot around here. It's talking about our incident reports, making sure we're checking what we're doing and what we're putting out. That product is that people see our reports. Just using that for one example, making sure that there are things about our reports that are done proper, so when someone reads it, so they look at it, they can say, hey, this is a well-written report, because that speaks about what we're doing as officers. That's our product. That's what we've done.
Right.
Along with that, I like to see where we're able to get out and do more community policing. That takes an understanding, and as you try to change the culture of how you do things in policing, you got to buy into it. But first, you got to understand how it actually works and how to put it into actually implementing in your day-to-day of going out and working.
Right.
And I think as we grow and as we do more training, one of the things that we started to really put officers is to start scheduling for more classes. I think that at the end of the day, the more trained you are, the better officer you're going to be, and the better service you're going to provide to the citizens. Right. When we forget to go to training, then of course we don't get up to date on where we need to be, so that we are doing the things that we're supposed to be doing, and fully understanding how we can become better officers. Because I feel that all of us can learn something. Even myself. We don't know it all, and things change. And at the end of the day, it's all right to say, "Hey, I don't know," and that I can learn something. And then once you learn it, you can go out and implement that and become a better officer. So that's the thing that I just want to provide a quality service to the citizens of Williamsburg County.
Good. Let's revisit what you said about community policing, and let's expand on that a little bit. Can you explain to the citizens of our county exactly what you deem as community policing, and how we could possibly help and aid the Sheriff's Department in our communities?
Right. Well, one of the things that I started back even when I was Chief Deputy as a Public Information Officer, I thought that was very pertinent to have someone that was able to relate to the public in all dynamics, not just for media releases or someone that speaks to the media, but actually someone that goes out and engages in the community. And the community can identify that, hey, this is a point of contact. So if I've got problems or things that I need to address, this is someone that I know I can identify with, that, hey, this is the face of my point of contact, and this is someplace I can always come to and say, hey, this is what I've got going in my community. These are the things that I'd like to know about. I've got questions. And he may not be the person to actually say, well, okay, well, I'm going to provide that answer. But at least he's that point of contact, and from there we can provide an answer to that. But the community policing, I think, is something that we actually have been doing in our Crime Watch meetings. And it's where we actually get out in the community, become involved, and be proactive. And we begin to get the community to understand that we want to be a part of them. To actually help them see how big a tool they are to law enforcement. Because if you think that you're going to go out here and just as a law enforcement officer and solve crime all by yourself, it's not going to happen.
Right.
The most successful tool we've got is the community. They
Sure.
provide us things that we need to know about. They provide us the answers to things that sometimes we just can't find the answer.
Sure.
We've done all the scientific stuff, and that's an outstanding thing and great. But at the end of the day, we also need that other element that the community is able to provide us. So I think when we start to intertwine the two, where we actually carry out statistics, in the last community meeting we had in Piney Forest, sometimes the things that come up are questions, and they're great questions because they want to know about certain things and what are the trends and what are the crime rates and what is property crime, going on at the time. Are we having a lot of violent crime? And so the more we get them to understand the things that we're looking at and getting the officers to see as well, hey, these are what we're looking at, this is what we're watching. Look at our data.
Sure.
What is it telling us? And conveying that to the public and getting them involved in looking at this data and looking at the strategy. Sometimes in law enforcement, we can look at things, I like to say here, right in the tunnel, so
Sure.
we're not looking outside.
Right.
So it's good to get people in the community that they may be from a different profession altogether,
Right.
but they've got a method or a way of looking at something that would actually help us to become better at what we're doing. It could be simple, sometimes the simplest thing, going out and changing signs, or maybe putting some lights in some areas, or
Sure.
just maybe doing things sometimes that we're not thinking about that would prevent
Right.
something from reoccurring.
Right.
And so I think that's where it's important to get community policing into what we're doing here in Williamsburg County. It can be a little challenging, yeah, because a lot of times with the shortage of manpower that we have, we don't have a lot of people. We have a lot of people doing lateral duties,
Sure.
and so it makes it difficult. But
Right.
we're going to get there.
Good, good. I think community policing is very vital, and I've seen it be very prosperous in other communities and other areas. And I think that it gives also you guys access to the public and public access to you as well.
Right.
And everybody feels like they're part of the community, that they're not being targeted, but they're they're working along with you guys to help control some of the crime issues that not very many of us have not experienced.
Right. That's right.
And especially in this area, which leads me to another question. There's been so much negativity surrounding our Justice Department, our police departments. Our phones have been great tools, but they've also been great weapons that really have brought a lot of negativity to the police departments and to the legal system. And with that in mind, the community being involved could help to bring a positive message back to our sheriff's department, to our police officers, to our deputies.
Right.
And how do you see that we could help change that, or help change in the future the mindsets of the people, because they feel the normal person feels threatened by someone in a uniform.
Right.
They might think that they might be targeted, or they might be stopped for no apparent reason or whatever. But if they can have an understanding that they're working along with the police department, then maybe we can get greater response and again change the mindset of the community.
Right.
And do better as far as community policing.
Right.
But going back to the negativity surrounding the police officers, how do you think that can change, or how do you see that what you guys can do to help change that, as well as the community being educated in that?
Well, that's where I think an important thing that we really undertook at the Sheriff's Office, and that's being involved in a lot of community events. I think the more that we become involved in our communities, the more people get to know us and they trust us.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, they'll come to us, or they'll come to the ones that they know in their communities, the ones that they trust, and they'll ask the questions, because sometimes there are misunderstandings, and misunderstandings are all right. About how something may have been done on a traffic stop, or just an encounter from a call for service, whatever it may be. But I think so much on the news is that you see incidents that some things have gone wrong when it involves law enforcement. But just like in any profession, there are bad apples in any profession.
Sure.
But you really have a lot of good people in professions, and some make mistakes, or sometimes things happen that should not happen, or things just went wrong. But at the end of the day, it's to build that confidence level in the officers that serve in this county, and that's by us actually getting out and interacting with them. Whether it be at a church function, whether it be at a birthday party, whether it be at just anything, any point that we can find to interact with people, we have to seize that opportunity so that we can change their mindsets about who we are. Let them know that, hey, we're normal. Most kids, I try to find all kind of events to interact with young people, because I think at the end of the day, that's the person that's building. And at the end of the day, they're developing their opinions, and they're listening to a lot of things that get said. Sometimes when adults are talking, they're listening. So they don't necessarily have their own perception, but they've heard what mom or dad's perception is. And so, you can still influence them a whole lot, and easy to change. But I think when we interact with them and show them who we are, let them know that we're normal people, that we have kids, that we face a different set of issues sometimes, and just being able to understand. Sometimes in law enforcement, and I found myself guilty of that, we do a lot more of telling instead of listening. And one of the things I learned to do is to learn to listen more, because sometimes we can both go at each other, but we'll meet a brick wall here.
Sure.
So at the end of the day, nothing gets done that way. And at the end of the day, we both leave, and of course, the person that you interact with has a negative perception of who you are and what we do. And say, well, that's just typical of law enforcement. They don't want to hear nothing nobody got to say, and they think they can tell you everything to do. And so at the end of the day, the more we listen, we can try to be positive and find a way to engage that person to hopefully change their mindset. And one of the things that I find that's very common in questions asked is, of course, with us being such a rural county, a lot of times things occur out in dark areas, cars get stopped in dark areas. Well, what do I do if I get stopped by the police and this goes wrong? And well, if the police stops me, then how do I deal with this? So of course, most common question is, I want to drive to a safe location. Well, of course, one good thing by interacting with them, you get to tell them how to actually do that safely. Without the officer, perceiving that they're trying to do something totally different than just to make it to a safe location. Even with calls for service, sometimes how we engage each other, by having a point where you come to a community meeting or something along that line, you can actually, you're in an environment where it's not as, I guess, confrontational. Maybe that's not the right word to use, but it's not necessarily the same setting as being under active call. So it gives you a chance to explain, why may the officer be doing certain things. You got officer presence, one of the things that you talk about of actually seeing you in the uniform. But, why may he present himself this way? So that way they understand, well, this is probably why the officer is doing what he's doing. And it's not necessarily meant to be offensive. And so you're able to also tell the other party involved, this is what you can do to make that contact, not so bad contact, where it can be positive for both law enforcement and the other individual involved. And sometimes if you're able to reach at those community meetings, 10 people, but at the end of the day, if you had an incident that occurred, say for instance in a community, and one of those persons that attended that meeting, the whole community might not come, but they may be present, and so they can actually have a rapport with that person. They're able to talk to them and say, listen, this probably can change if we try to address it this way, and they can help you mediate the situation, because they bought into it, now they understand what we're trying to do. So that way we have a different contact. And the more that we do things of that nature, then we can change the mindset of how we're perceived as law enforcement officers. And there are things to be done on our side. We have to teach our officers at the end of the day about ethics and those type of things, and understand that people are different. Nobody's the same, and that just because it may be one way doesn't mean that our way is totally right, and we have to be considerate of others. So there's teaching to be done on both sides, but the only way we're able to make that happen is we got to get out of interacting. But
because of negative perception that that the media loves to portray, there's a lot of young people that maybe have considered law enforcement careers but have chosen not to because of the negative connotations around law enforcement. Can you address, or can you speak to those young people for just a minute and give them the positive side of what you all do?
Okay. I tell you what, I think a lot of times when people see some of the incidents that we're involved in as police officers, it is, you talk to a lot of young people, I'm not quite sure that's what I want to do, or, I went to college and I think I'm going to pursue something else. But I would say this is a rewarding career. It's something where you can see an end result. You're able to look back and say, well, did I make a difference? Sometimes, you may not go out and change the world, You know, that can be a monstrous task.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, you can look back and say, hey, I made a difference in this child's life, or, you know, it may be something as simple as an unrestrained child in a car.
Right.
They're traveling down the road, and you stop that vehicle, and at the end of the day, you tell them, hey, you buckle up this child, and you teach them the right thing. And there may be something down the road that you can look back and say, well, I'm glad that I did that, because at the end of the day, now that behavior has changed.
Sure.
Or it could be something as simple as just talking to someone. And, you know, someone that has sometimes, I guess, the wrong direction in life. And you engage that person, so you become more of a guidance counselor. And at the end of the day, you can help change and guide that person to become a different person. And that can happen from all ages. You know, that can happen to someone that's a child, someone that's a teenager, someone that's an adult that maybe made some wrong decisions. When it comes down to sometimes even just saving lives, you know, sometimes you're usually the first person on scene, so you're able to get some things done. You know, you may come there and there's someone that you have to use a tourniquet to try to save that person so they're not losing an astronomical amount of blood that will cause life-threatening, you know, injuries to that person. So there's different things that I guess you can say that you will encounter. And I think those are rewarding things. You know, those are things that you can look back and say, well, hey, I made a difference. Especially if you're big into, you know, doing public service. So I think it's a rewarding career, but I will say this, it has to be something that you want to do. You know, sometimes, you know, law enforcement, I don't think it's something that everybody would want to do. But I think if it's something that's in your blood and something that you say, hey, I want to go out and make a difference in my community and be able to look back and say, hey, I can look and see what I've done as a law enforcement officer, I think law enforcement is an area that you can do that.
You truly have to be a public servant.
No, without a doubt.
For sure. For sure.
That's right.
One last question, and we'll wrap it up. I was asking you earlier about the bail's bondsman, and I want to make sure to get my verbiage right on this. It's my understanding that if a loved one gets arrested, I can no longer put up land or something against his bail. Can you explain that a little bit more, how that works?
I probably would not be the best person to explain that part of it to you, because I'm familiar with what we deal with here is pretty much dealing with the actual bail's bondsman coming in, and that's usually in court where they deal with the magistrate. As far as anything, as far as collateral, like let's say for instance, you had a $1,000 fine, and so 10% of that would be $100 because you're not able to pay the $1,000. So you get a bail's bondman to post bond for you so that your family member or a loved one can get out of the detention center at that time. As far as putting up collateral, let's say you didn't have the $100, but you had a home that had a mortgage, but you had paid off whatever it may be on that mortgage, and so there was some collateral to be gotten from that. That's something that you would have to go over to the courthouse and work out with the court. That's something that we wouldn't handle here. So I would hate to try to give you an answer to that, and it'd be wrong.
Okay, well, we'll have to
get it. Leave from there and say, Steve Gardner has no clue what he was talking about.
Well, the sheriff said. Well, Sheriff, it's been a delight sitting down with you. You've been very informative, and and we're looking for great things over the next few years. Thank you again for your service to our community. And just want to remind everybody that next week we will be sitting down with our Senator, Ronnie Sabb. So make sure to tune in next week for that. Thank you very much. Have a great day.